Picture this. You're walking through what seems like an ordinary forest. Birds chirp overhead, leaves crunch beneath your feet. But then you notice something strange. The trees are growing in perfect lines. Too perfect, too organized. You brush away centuries of dirt and moss, and your heart stops. Beneath your hands lies carved stone, intricate patterns, ancient writing in a language no one alive can read. This isn't imagination. This is reality. Right now, scattered across our planet, lie the remnants of entire civilizations that once thrived, built magnificent cities, developed complex societies, and then vanished. Not conquered, not destroyed by natural disaster, simply gone, as if they walked into the mist of history and never returned. Today, we're diving into 10 of history's greatest mysteries, 10 lost civilizations that disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only whispers in stone and questions that have haunted archaeologists for generations. But here's what makes these disappearances so unsettling. We're not talking about small tribes or forgotten villages. These were advanced societies with sophisticated architecture, complex writing systems, and populations in the hundreds of thousands. They had trade networks spanning continents, astronomical knowledge that rivals our own, and artistic achievements that still take our breath away. And then, nothing. No final battles, no great exodus, no apocalyptic ending, just empty cities slowly being reclaimed by nature, like ghost towns from another world. The cooking fires went cold. The temples fell silent. The streets, once filled with the bustle of daily life, echoed only with the wind. How does an entire civilization just disappear? Civilization 1. The Indus Valley, the Forgotten Giants. Our first stop takes us back nearly 5,000 years to what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Here, along the banks of the Indus River, flourished one of humanity's earliest and most mysterious civilizations. The Indus Valley civilization wasn't small. At its peak, around 2600 BCE, it was home to over 5 million people spread across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Their cities, particularly Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, were marvels of urban planning that wouldn't look out of place in a modern city. Picture streets laid out in perfect grids, advanced drainage systems that channeled waste away from homes, public baths with sophisticated waterproofing, multi-story buildings with private wells. These weren't primitive settlements. These were the blueprints for modern civilization, built when most of the world was still living in mud huts. But here's where it gets strange. Despite their obvious sophistication, we know almost nothing about who they were. They developed one of the world's earliest writing systems, carving symbols onto seals and pottery. Thousands of these inscriptions have been found, yet not a single one has been deciphered. It's as if they deliberately encrypted their entire history. Even more puzzling is how they disappeared. Around 1900 BCE, the great cities were simply abandoned. There's no evidence of warfare, no signs of natural disaster, no indication of disease. The people just left. Some theories suggest climate change dried up their rivers. Others propose they migrated south, eventually becoming part of later Indian civilizations. But these are just educated guesses. The most haunting evidence comes from Mohenjo-Daro itself. In the upper levels of the city, archaeologists found skeletons scattered in the streets, as if people died suddenly where they stood. Some show signs of violent death, but who killed them and why remains a mystery. Whatever happened in those final days, it was significant enough to make an entire civilization disappear from history. Civilization 2, the Minoans, Europe's first great mystery. From the dusty plains of Pakistan, we travel to the sparkling Mediterranean, to the island of Crete. Here, around 3000 BCE, arose Europe's first advanced civilization, the Minoans. Named after the legendary King Minos of Greek mythology, the Minoans built something unprecedented in European history. Their palace at Knossos was a sprawling complex of over 1,300 rooms, complete with running water, flush toilets, and elaborate frescoes depicting dolphins, bulls, and elegant ladies in flowing dresses. But the Minoans weren't just architects. They were Europe's first great seafaring civilization, dominating Mediterranean trade for over 1,000 years. Their ships carried precious goods from Egypt to Spain, making Crete the Hong Kong of the ancient world. What makes the Minoans particularly fascinating is their apparent peacefulness. Unlike other Bronze Age civilizations, Minoan cities had no walls, no weapons stockpiles, no glorification of warfare in their art. Instead, their frescoes show festivals, religious ceremonies, and the famous bull-leaping rituals, where young athletes would vault over charging bulls in what might have been the world's first extreme sport. Then, around 1450 BCE, this peaceful paradise came to an abrupt end. The great palaces were destroyed, their elaborate frescoes blackened by fire. The Minoan fleet vanished from the seas. Their unique linear A writing system fell silent, never to be used again. But here's the mystery. We still don't know what caused their downfall. The most popular theory links it to the massive volcanic eruption on nearby Santorini around 1600 BCE, one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history. This eruption would have sent tsunamis crashing into Crete's northern coast and covered the island in volcanic ash. Yet the timeline doesn't quite fit. The eruption happened 150 years before the Minoan collapse. Could a civilization that survived such a catastrophe simply fade away decades later? Some archaeologists now believe the Minoans were conquered by Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland. But if so, where are the battle sites? Where are the mass graves? The truth is, we may never know what ended Europe's first great civilization, leaving us with only their beautiful art and the echo of their mystery. Civilization 3, the Olmecs, America's lost mother culture. Crossing the Atlantic, we find ourselves in the steamy jungles of Mexico's Gulf Coast, where around 1500 BCE, the America's first great civilization began to take shape. The Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, would lay the foundation for all later civilizations in the region, from the Maya to the Aztecs. The Olmecs are perhaps best known for their colossal stone heads, some weighing up to 40 tons. These massive sculptures, with their distinctive helmets and stern expressions, were carved from basalt quarried over 60 miles away and somehow transported through dense jungle terrain. The logistics alone suggest a highly organized society with advanced engineering knowledge. But the Olmecs were more than just skilled sculptors. They developed one of the world's earliest writing systems in the Americas, created a complex calendar, and built the first pyramids in the Western Hemisphere. Their capital city of La Venta was a carefully planned ceremonial center with precise astronomical alignments. Perhaps most remarkably, the Olmecs seem to have invented the concept of zero independently, a mathematical breakthrough that wouldn't appear in Europe for another 1,000 years. They also created the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritual sport that would spread throughout ancient America and survive in various forms until the Spanish conquest. Yet around 400 BCE, Olmec civilization suddenly collapsed. Their great cities were abandoned, their monuments buried under jungle growth, their writing system forgotten. Unlike other Mesoamerican civilizations that left detailed historical records, the Olmecs left us no explanation for their disappearance. Some theories suggest environmental change, perhaps flooding or drought, forced them to abandon their homeland. Others propose internal conflicts or invasion by neighboring peoples. But the most intriguing possibility is that they didn't disappear at all, but rather transformed, their people and culture being absorbed into the emerging Maya civilization. This would explain why so many later Mesoamerican cultures share Olmec innovations: the calendar, the writing system, the ball game, the artistic styles. Perhaps the Olmecs didn't vanish, but evolved, their legacy living on in every pyramid and temple built in ancient America. Civilization 4, the Mycenaeans, Greece's forgotten heroes. Our journey now takes us back to Greece, but not the Greece of classical Athens and Sparta. This is Bronze Age Greece, around 1600 BCE, where the Mycenaeans built Europe's first warrior civilization. The Mycenaeans were everything the peaceful Minoans were not. Their cities were fortresses perched on hilltops, protected by massive stone walls that later Greeks believed could only have been built by giants. Their kings were buried in elaborate tombs filled with gold masks, bronze weapons, and precious jewels that rival anything found in Egyptian pharaohs' tombs. These were the people who inspired Homer's epic poems. The legendary Trojan War, if it happened at all, was likely fought by Mycenaean warriors sailing from their fortress cities to distant Troy. The heroes of the Iliad, Agamemnon and Menelaus, Achilles and Odysseus, may have been echoes of real Mycenaean kings whose deeds were passed down through centuries of oral tradition. The Mycenaeans dominated the eastern Mediterranean for nearly 500 years. They conquered Minoan Crete, established colonies across the Greek islands, and traded with civilizations from Egypt to Troy. Their Linear B writing system, successfully deciphered in the 1950s, reveals a highly organized palace economy with detailed records of everything from sheep and chariots to offerings to the gods. But around 1200 BCE, this Bronze Age world came crashing down. Within a few decades, almost every Mycenaean palace was destroyed by fire. Cities were abandoned, trade networks collapsed, and the art of writing was lost. Greece entered what historians call the Dark Age, a period of nearly 4 centuries when the sophisticated Bronze Age world was forgotten. What caused this collapse? The traditional explanation blamed mysterious sea peoples, raiders from the north, who supposedly swept across the Mediterranean, destroying civilizations wherever they landed. But modern archaeology paints a more complex picture. Evidence suggests internal conflicts, economic problems, and possibly climate change all played a role. Some palaces show signs of deliberate destruction from within, suggesting civil wars or popular revolts. Others were simply abandoned, as if their inhabitants packed up and left for reasons we can't fathom. The most likely explanation is that Mycenaean civilization collapsed under the weight of its own complexity, unable to adapt to changing conditions. Whatever the cause, the fall of the Mycenaeans marked the end of Bronze Age civilization in Greece and the beginning of centuries of darkness from which new civilizations would eventually emerge. Civilization 5. The Axumites, Africa's forgotten empire. From the Mediterranean, we venture south to the highlands of Ethiopia, where between 100 and 940 CE stood one of the ancient world's great trading empires, Axum. At its height, Axum was considered one of the 4 great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. The kingdom controlled the Red Sea trade routes, serving as the crucial link between the Roman Empire and ancient India. Axumite merchants dealt in gold, ivory, and exotic spices, making their capital one of the wealthiest cities in the ancient world. The most visible legacy of Aksumite civilization is their extraordinary obelisks, towering granite monuments that still stand today. The largest, had it not fallen, would have been taller than any structure in the ancient world except the Great Pyramid of Giza. These weren't just monuments, but architectural marvels, carved from single pieces of stone and precisely fitted together without mort. Aksum was also one of the first Christian kingdoms in the world. King Ezana converted to Christianity in the 4th century, decades before it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. The kingdom developed its own unique form of Christianity, complete with ancient churches carved directly into solid rock that still function today. The Aksumites also developed their own script, Ge'ez, which is still used in Ethiopian religious ceremonies. Their coins, made of gold, silver, and bronze, were recognized throughout the ancient world and have been found as far away as India and China. But perhaps most mysteriously, Aksum claimed to possess the original Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, was an Aksumite ruler, and their son brought the Ark back to Ethiopia, where it remains to this day in a church in Aksum, guarded by a single monk who alone is allowed to see it. Then, around 940 CE, this great empire simply faded from history. The last Aksumite coins were minted, trade routes shifted elsewhere, and the kingdom fragmented into smaller states. Some blame climate change and the expansion of Islam, which cut Aksum off from its Mediterranean trading partners. Others suggest internal conflicts and the rise of the Zagwe dynasty. But unlike many lost civilizations, Aksum's disappearance might be more of a transformation than a collapse. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserves many Aksumite traditions, and the modern nation of Ethiopia traces its heritage back to this ancient kingdom. Perhaps Aksum didn't disappear, but evolved, its legacy living on in the highlands where it began. Civilization 6, the Cahokians, America's forgotten metropolis. Our next destination might surprise you. We're traveling to the American Midwest, to what is now southern Illinois, where between 1050 and 1200 CE stood the largest city north of Mexico, Cahokia. At its peak, Cahokia was home to over 15,000 people, making it larger than London or Paris at the time. The city covered nearly 6 square miles and was dominated by massive earthen pyramids, the largest of which, Monk's Mound, is still the biggest prehistoric structure in the Americas. But Cahokia wasn't just large, it was sophisticated. The city was carefully planned with ceremonial plazas, residential neighborhoods, and specialized craft areas. Archaeological evidence shows that people came from hundreds of miles away to live and work in this Native American metropolis. The Cahokians were master engineers. They built a wooden circle, now called Woodhenge, that functioned as a sophisticated astronomical calendar. They created an extensive network of earthworks and waterways that controlled flooding and provided transportation. They even built suburbs, smaller settlements connected to the main city by ancient highways. What made Cahokia possible was corn. The Mississippian culture that built the city had perfected corn agriculture, creating food surpluses that could support large populations and allow for specialization. Cahokian artisans created beautiful pottery, copper jewelry, and stone sculptures that were traded across much of North America. The city's influence extended far beyond its borders. Cahokian-style artifacts have been found from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, evidence of a vast trade network that made Cahokia the New York of ancient America. But then, around 1200 CE, something went wrong. the population began to decline. The great mounds were abandoned, and by 1400 CE, the site was completely deserted. When European explorers arrived in the region, they found only empty earthworks, with local Native American tribes having no memory of who had built them. What caused Cahokia's abandonment? Climate change is the leading suspect. The medieval warm period, which had allowed corn agriculture to flourish in the region, came to an end around 1200 CE, replaced by cooler, more variable weather. This may have made large-scale agriculture impossible, forcing the population to disperse. Others suggest that Cahokia's rapid growth led to environmental degradation. The city may have outstripped its resource base, cutting down too many trees and exhausting the soil. Political instability and warfare with neighboring groups may have also played a role. Whatever the cause, Cahokia's abandonment meant that when Europeans arrived in North America, they found no trace of the continent's greatest indigenous city, leading to centuries of misconceptions about Native American capabilities and achievements. Civilization 7, Easter Island's Rapa Nui, Isolation's extreme test. From the heart of America, we journey to one of the most isolated places on Earth, Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, a tiny speck of land in the Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles from the nearest populated land. Here, Polynesian voyagers arrived around 1200 CE, bringing with them the plants, animals, and skills needed to create a civilization in one of the world's most remote locations. What they built over the next few centuries would become one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The Rapa Nui people are best known for their moai, the nearly 1,000 giant stone statues that dot the island. These weren't crude carvings, but sophisticated sculptures, some nearly 40 feet tall and weighing up to 80 tons. Recent discoveries have shown that many moai have bodies buried underground, making them even more impressive than previously thought. But the moai were just one aspect of a complex society. The Rapa Nui developed their own writing system, Rongorongo, one of only a few writing systems created independently in the Pacific. They built sophisticated stone platforms called ahu, some weighing hundreds of tons, that served as ceremonial and burial sites. The island supported a population that may have reached 15,000 people at its peak. They developed intensive agriculture, building stone gardens that protected crops from salt spray and wind. They created a complex social system with competing clans and elaborate religious ceremonies. Then, something went catastrophically wrong. When European explorers arrived in 1722, they found fewer than 3,000 people living in poverty among the ruins of a once great civilization. The moai lay toppled, the ahu were in ruins, and the island was largely treeless and eroded. What happened to the Rapa Nui has become a cautionary tale about environmental collapse. The traditional explanation suggests that the islanders cut down all their trees, destroying their environment and causing their civilization to collapse in what author Jared Diamond called ecocide. But recent research suggests the story is more complex. Pollen analysis shows that deforestation began soon after Polynesian rats, accidentally introduced by the first settlers, began eating palm seeds, preventing forest regeneration. Climate change during the Little Ice Age may have made agriculture more difficult. European contact brought diseases that devastated the population, and Peruvian slave raids in the 1860s carried away many of the island's remaining people. The real tragedy of Easter Island may not be environmental collapse, but the disruption of a sustainable island civilization by outside forces. The Rapa Nui had survived in isolation for 500 years. It was contact with the wider world that proved their undoing. Civilization 8, the Pueblo builders of Mesa Verde, the Great Departure. Our journey now takes us to the American Southwest, to the mesas and canyons of Colorado, where between 600 and 1300 CE, the ancestral Puebloans, once called the Anasazi, built some of North America's most spectacular ancient architecture. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde are architectural marvels that seem to defy gravity. Built into natural alcoves in sandstone cliffs, these structures include multi-story apartment complexes, ceremonial chambers called kivas, and defensive towers. The largest, Cliff Palace, contains over 150 rooms and could house several hundred people. But Mesa Verde was just one part of a vast civilization that covered much of the Four Corners region. The ancestral Puebloans were master architects and engineers who built roads connecting distant communities, created sophisticated irrigation systems in the desert, and constructed astronomical observatories that tracked the movements of the sun and moon. They were also accomplished artists and craftspeople. Their pottery, with its distinctive black-on-white designs, is considered among the finest ever made in North America. They wove intricate baskets, created turquoise jewelry, and developed a complex trade network that brought shells from the Pacific coast and macaws from Mexico. What makes the ancestral Puebloans particularly fascinating is their apparent obsession with astronomy and mathematics. Their buildings are aligned with celestial events, their artwork incorporates complex geometric patterns, and their ceremonial sites mark important astronomical observations. The civilization reached its peak during the 1100s with large towns and extensive trade networks. Then, in the late 1200s, something changed. The great cliff dwellings were abandoned, the trade networks collapsed, and the population dispersed. By 1300 CE, Mesa Verde was empty. The timing of this abandonment coincides with a severe drought that lasted from 1276 to 1299, recorded in tree rings throughout the region. This great drought may have made agriculture impossible in many areas, forcing people to abandon their ancestral homes. But the story isn't simply one of environmental collapse. Archaeological evidence suggests that the late period was marked by increased warfare, with defensive structures and burned buildings indicating conflict between communities. Resource competition during the drought may have led to violence that made continued occupation impossible. Unlike some lost civilizations, we know what happened to the ancestral Puebloans. They didn't disappear, but moved south and east, becoming the ancestors of modern Pueblo peoples, like the Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblos. Their departure from Mesa Verde wasn't an ending, but a transformation, a response to changing conditions that allowed their culture to survive in new locations. Civilization 9, the Khmer Empire, the jungle's greatest secret. From the American Southwest, we travel to the jungles of Cambodia, where between 800 and 1400 CE stood one of history's most impressive civilizations, the Khmer Empire, centered on the magnificent city of Angkor. Angkor wasn't just a city. It was the world's largest pre-industrial settlement, covering over 400 square miles and home to nearly 1 million people. The city was dominated by massive temple complexes, the most famous being Angkor Wat, originally built as a Hindu temple and later converted to Buddhism. But Angkor Wat was just one of over 1,000 temples scattered throughout the Angkor complex. These weren't simple buildings, but architectural marvels, covered in intricate carvings that tell the stories of Hindu epics and Khmer history. The precision of the stonework, the scale of the construction, and the sophistication of the engineering rival anything built in medieval Europe. The Khmer Empire was a hydraulic civilization, dependent on an elaborate system of canals, reservoirs, and rice paddies that supported the massive population. This water management system, covering thousands of square miles, was one of the most sophisticated urban water systems ever created before the modern era. At its peak in the 12th century, the Khmer Empire controlled much of Southeast Asia, from southern Vietnam to Burma. Khmer armies, equipped with war elephants and supported by a vast bureaucracy, extracted tribute from dozens of vassal states. The wealth that flowed into Angkor funded not just temples, but a sophisticated court culture with elaborate ceremonies, classical dance, and literary achievements. Then, gradually, this great empire began to decline. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned, its temples slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. When French explorers discovered Angkor in the 1860s, local people knew of the ruins, but had no detailed knowledge of who had built them. What caused the decline of the Khmer Empire? Recent research using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar has revealed that the empire's sophisticated water management system may have been both its greatest strength and ultimate weakness. Climate change in the 14th and 15th centuries brought both severe droughts and devastating floods that the rigid canal system couldn't handle. At the same time, the rise of Thai kingdoms to the west and Vietnamese expansion from the east put military pressure on the empire. The increasing popularity of Theravada Buddhism, with its emphasis on individual spiritual achievement rather than elaborate temple building, may have reduced support for the massive construction projects that had defined Khmer civilization. The Khmer Empire didn't disappear entirely. It transformed and moved, with the capital eventually shifting to Phnom Penh. But the great city of Angkor was abandoned to the jungle, becoming one of history's most spectacular ghost towns. Civilization 10, the Nazca, Masters of the Impossible. Our final destination takes us to the arid plains of southern Peru, where between 200 BCE and 700 CE, the Nazca people created one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, the Nazca Lines. These aren't just lines, but an entire gallery of art etched into the desert floor, covering nearly 200 square miles. The geoglyphs include not just the famous lines, but also enormous drawings of animals, plants, and geometric figures. Some of these images are so large, they can only be fully appreciated from the air, leading to wild speculation about their purpose and creators. But the Nazca Lines were just one aspect of a sophisticated civilization that thrived in one of the world's most challenging environments. The Nazca people were master engineers who created an extensive network of underground aqueducts called puquios that brought water from distant mountains to their desert cities. Some of these aqueducts are still in use today, nearly 2,000 years after they were built. The Nazca were also accomplished artists and craftspeople. Their textiles, made from cotton and alpaca wool, feature some of the most complex and colorful designs ever created in pre-Columbian America. Their pottery includes realistic portraits and fantastical creatures that suggest a rich mythology and ceremonial life. Perhaps most remarkably, the Nazca were skilled trophy headhunters. Archaeological sites contain hundreds of human heads that were carefully preserved and decorated, apparently for use in religious ceremonies. These trophy heads, along with depictions in Nazca art, suggest a warrior culture with elaborate rituals surrounding death and the afterlife. The purpose of the Nazca Lines remains hotly debated. Some scholars believe they were astronomical calendars, pointing to important celestial events. Others suggest they were part of water ceremonies, designed to attract rainfall to the desert. Still others propose they were ritual walkways, Paths followed during religious ceremonies, but around 700 CE, Nazca civilization began to decline. Climate change brought severe droughts that made their desert environment even more challenging. The El Niño phenomenon, which brings devastating floods to coastal Peru, may have damaged their irrigation systems. At the same time, the Wari Empire, expanding from the highlands, began to incorporate Nazca territories. Unlike some lost civilizations, the end of the Nazca wasn't sudden or mysterious. It appears to have been a gradual process of environmental stress and political change. The people didn't disappear, but were absorbed into other Andean cultures, their knowledge and traditions becoming part of the diverse tapestry of pre-Columbian Peru. The great mystery continues. As our journey through these lost civilizations comes to an end, we're left with more questions than answers. Each of these societies faced unique challenges, from environmental change to warfare to internal collapse. Yet, they all share common threads that make their disappearances so haunting. Many were at the height of their power when they vanished. The Indus Valley cities were thriving when they were abandoned. Cahokia was larger than London when its people dispersed. The Mycenaean palaces were magnificent when they burned. These weren't dying civilizations, but vibrant societies that seemed to have bright futures ahead of them. What's perhaps most unsettling is how quickly and completely they disappeared. In most cases, within a generation or two, sophisticated civilizations with complex technologies and elaborate cultures were reduced to empty ruins. The cooking fires went cold, the temples fell silent, and the accumulated wisdom of centuries was lost to time. Yet their disappearances also teach us valuable lessons about resilience and adaptation. Many of these lost civilizations didn't truly vanish, but transformed, their people and cultures continuing in new forms. The ancestral Puebloans became the modern Pueblo peoples. The Axumites evolved into medieval Ethiopia. The Olmecs laid the foundation for all later Mesoamerican civilizations. Perhaps most importantly, these lost civilizations remind us of humanity's incredible creativity and adaptability. In every corner of the world, in every type of environment, humans have built remarkable societies, developed sophisticated technologies, and created beautiful art. They remind us that our modern world is just the latest chapter in a much longer story of human achievement. But mysteries remain. Deep in jungles and deserts, buried under centuries of soil and vegetation, other lost civilizations wait to be discovered. New technologies like satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar are revealing hidden cities and forgotten peoples at an unprecedented rate. Who knows what secrets still lie buried? What other great civilizations rose and fell without leaving their stories in our history books? What other mysteries await discovery by future archaeologists? The past is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. Every year brings new discoveries that challenge our understanding of human history. Every excavation reveals that our ancestors were more sophisticated, more creative, and more resilient than we gave them credit for. These lost civilizations didn't disappear without a trace after all. They left us their greatest gift, the knowledge that humans are capable of incredible things, that civilizations can rise from nothing and create wonders that last for millennia. They remind us that we are part of a continuous story of human achievement that stretches back thousands of years and will continue long into the future. The only question is, what mysteries will future archaeologists discover about our own civilization? What stories will they tell about us? And what questions will our ruins raise for those who come after? The mystery of lost civilizations isn't just about the past. It's about understanding ourselves, our capabilities, and our place in the grand sweep of human history. And that mystery, thankfully, will never be fully solved.